So feeling like a fraud, that your success is down to luck, and that horrible feeling that any minute now you might be exposed. These are for sure all signs of imposter syndrome, but they are not the only ones. Hello, happy Tuesday, and welcome to today's live broadcast on imposter syndrome. My name's Caroline Flanagan. I'm the career coach for lawyers with imposter syndrome. I help you get more recognition, have more confidence, get better balance, and how to do your day-to-day job of being a lawyer with so much more ease. Now, today is the second in a series of lives that I am delivering on imposter syndrome, where I'll be sharing my knowledge, my experience, my insights on imposter syndrome to help you understand how it might be holding you back in your career and, crucially, what you can do about it in order for you to progress. So here's how these lives work. I am going to do a short introduction on a specific topic for each live. And I'm going to then open it up for questions. So as I'm talking, if any questions occur to you, please put them in the comments box. They should come up on the screen here for me, and I'll do my best to answer them. If you've got any burning questions about imposter syndrome you've always wanted to ask, then post those too. If I don't have time to answer them in this session, I will make sure I come back to them. I may even do a live session specifically answering your question. So even if it doesn't relate to today's topic, I still want to hear your thoughts and see your comments. If you're watching this on the replay, welcome to you as well. And again, send me your comments. You can also DM me if you'd rather not send them too publicly. Captions, very important. I'm actually live streaming to a number of different platforms, and they all do captions differently. In most cases, you can turn on captions on this audio manually in the particular platform that you're on. So if you're on LinkedIn, just go into your settings and you can turn them on. I think that's how it works. I'm going to double check that again. Finally, engagement. Engage with me. Tell me if you like what you hear. Tell me if you disagree with what you hear. I want to hear it all. This is about having a conversation, me being here available to you to answer all your questions. Likewise, if you're loving what you hear, if it's resonating with you, maybe you want to share it with someone who you think will find it useful too. Use all the buttons, all the likes, all the shares. I'd be delighted really to hear that you are enjoying this and are sharing it with your network. Okay, so in yesterday's live, I answered the question, what is imposter syndrome and how do you know that you have it? And I introduced you to what I call the classic signs of imposter syndrome. And I call these the classic signs because they are the three very specific indicators that were first identified by US psychologist Dr. Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes back in 1978 when the expression imposter syndrome was first coined. So these were the classic signs. If you haven't seen that live recording, I urge you to go back and watch it. It'll give you a very helpful, simple, clear explanation of those classic signs. Very easy to identify. So you'll never have to ask again, what is imposter syndrome? That will give you the first answer. But as I said yesterday, they are not the only signs. So in today's live, we're going to be talking about the other ones, what I call the secret signs of imposter syndrome, the ones you don't usually hear about, but are still potentially holding you back in your career. Now, if you have even remotely suspected that you might have imposter syndrome, but the classic signs of feeling like a fraud, that your success is down to luck, and that any minute now you're going to be exposed, if those signs didn't resonate with you, then you're going to want to listen to today's broadcast, because I'm going to be talking about the other signs. So describing lots of different behaviors and actions which you may be doing in your day-to-day work. not knowing that they are, in fact, signs of imposter syndrome. So you're going to want to stay tuned today, because what I'm going to share with you is going to give you an even clearer and deeper understanding of this subject, and in particular, why it's relevant to you. So what then are the secret signs of imposter syndrome? Well, yesterday I described the classic signs as the things that you feel. So they're a feeling, like an emotion. Now, the secret signs are different because what they relate to is the things that you do. In other words, they are actions or behaviors, if you like. And if you're looking for those signs, then you want to be paying attention to your everyday behaviors, how you approach your work, what you do at work, how you think at work. So these are all actions and behaviors. And there's so many of them that are secret signs of imposter syndrome. I have classified them into 4 groups. Makes it really easy for me to talk about them, to explain them to you, and crucially, for you to identify them in your own behavior. And the 4 groups are as follows. Number 1 is overworking. Number 2 is overthinking. Number 3 is some form of self-sabotage. And number 4 is playing small. So those are the 4 groups. I want you to always keep those 4 very simple titles or groups in your mind as we go through the details, the specific examples of each of those. But before I do, here's what you need to know. These are all things that you actually do. As I said, they're all actions, behaviors. And the key thing, and what makes them indicators of imposter syndrome, is that they're driven by some form of insufficiency. In other words, a fear of not being enough. And there are all sorts of different ways in which you might be feeling that, right? It could be the fear of not being good enough, not being experienced enough, not being privately educated enough, white enough, black enough, female enough, male enough, straight enough. There's an endless stream of experiences or emotions that we as human beings can feel that we are somehow at risk of being excluded from the group. And so much of that depends on the environment or the group that we are part of. It depends on our circumstances. So there's an infinite number. And as I go then through the examples of imposter syndrome, these secret signs, I want you to note the following. All of these actions then, as I said, they're driven by insufficiency, the fear of not being enough. And what's really the key word here is fear. It's not the actions themselves, it's the fear that drives them. So what that means is I might say or describe a behavior and you think, well, that's not imposter syndrome. And so I want you to ask, yes, but where is that action coming from? So if you're working late, for example, on a piece of work, you're checking it over and over and over again. If that constant checking comes from a very focused place of trusting in your ability to spot something that might be missing, then that's one thing. But if the action of spending that extra hour checking something again and then checking it again, if that comes from the fear that you've missed something, the fear of the consequences if you get it wrong, then that's a sign of imposter syndrome. So you want to look at the underlying feeling or emotion that drives the action in order to be able to determine whether the action or behavior itself is a sign of imposter syndrome. Are you with me? Stay with me. As I give you the examples, it's all going to become super clear. So other couple of points to mention before we go into the detail of those specific behaviors. The insufficiency, it's quite a lot to get my tongue around at this time in the morning, it's not necessarily conscious. So if you're feeling all sorts of resistance about, it's not that I think I'm not white enough, or it's not that I think I'm not male enough. So if you're resisting that, first of all, I want you to always pay attention to what you might be resisting. And you know you're resisting something if you have a voice in your head that's saying, well, that's not me, and that doesn't work, and I don't agree with that. That can be a form of resistance. But actually, resistance we feel in our bodies. It's actually a physical feeling that you're experiencing. And part of the work I do, which is so important and powerful and creates the transformation that I create for you in Imposter Syndrome coaching, which is my coaching program, is your developing your awareness to when you're resisting something and when you are experiencing an emotion or a feeling in your body, and that is affecting how you either show up to your work, but also how you receive the information that you're hearing, how you interpret the world around you. So I just want you to be open to the fact, just to consider that the insufficiency, I want you to trust me. The insufficiency is there. It just may not be conscious. And also, as I've said, those different ways in which it's a fear of not being enough, there's so many different versions of that. And it will be different for everyone based on your background, who you are, how you think about yourself, and your environment, the one in which you work. Okay, so let's talk about those secret signs so you can have a think about how many of them you may be displaying. Number one, remember that first group was overworking. Now, this I would describe as all the behavior that effectively makes things take longer than they should. Here are some examples. You labor over emails, correcting, checking, editing, deleting, rewriting them, for example. You quadruple check your work, remember, from a place of fear. You don't delegate, or you delegate and DIY. In other words, you delegate it out, and then when it comes back, you do it all again yourself. You don't set boundaries. You don't actually ever finish a piece of work. You just run out of time. And you under-record your hours. This is a sneaky one. Under-recording your hours doesn't sound like something you do that makes work take longer than it should. But if you're under-recording your hours and it comes from a place of fear, then the chances are the amount of time you're spending on your work is more than you should, and it's driven by fear. So watch out for that. If you are someone who may have spent 4 hours on a particular client matter, but you only record 3 hours or 2 hours because you think 4 hours is too much, that is a secret sign. Be onto yourself. Category number 2 is overthinking. And this is essentially all the worrying you do, often spending sometimes more time worrying than it actually takes to do the task. Examples of overthinking, how you know this is you. All or nothing thinking. What I mean by that is you have a thought about a particular person at work, or a comment that's been made at you at work in response to perhaps something you've done. And if that could be a negative or a positive, but you make that one comment, or you take the thought you have about it and you apply it to everything. So it's when you take one particular experience or scenario and you make that into a rule that you apply to every other scenario. So all or nothing thinking. It's an inability to see the exceptions, to see how you might have a thought about something, but that thought may not apply to everything, usually in the negative. Worrying, you'll be struck off, literally having that worry in your head as you approach a piece of work or something important. Worrying you'll let others down. Worrying other people who believe in you are wrong about you. Worrying that you won't know the answer. Going into meetings praying no one will ask you a question or ask you to speak. Failing ahead of time. And that's where you work through a scenario in your head and you imagine yourself doing it and you're so sure you won't do a good enough job at it, you then don't put yourself forward for it, or don't engage with it. So those are all examples of overthinking. And if you're ever confused, it just requires an awareness of what your thoughts are in a particular moment and whether your thoughts are ones of worry and anxiety. So all of you suffer from all this anxiety, the things that you worry about. Interestingly, I was talking to on a consult earlier was it this week? It was the end of last week. And the person I was talking to, the lawyer I was talking to, and she said, I worry about the future. I worry what might happen. I worry about my kids. I worry about whether I should stay in this job or move to another one. I worry I might be not fulfilling my potential. All signs of overthinking. It's worrying and thinking that doesn't serve you. Category number 3 is self-sabotage. These are the things you do to undermine yourself, and often they relate to scenarios in which you have the opportunity to build confidence. But instead, what you do, instead of internalizing your success, for example, in a particular scenario, you undermine yourself. Here's how you know that you're doing it. Maybe you actually get some praise or a compliment and positive feedback, and you discount or discredit it. You think of all the reasons why it's not true or it's not down to you. Or you beat yourself up over the smallest mistake, like really beat yourself up as if it's the worst thing in the world, as proof that you're not good enough or you don't deserve to be here or you're going to be found out. You make negative feedback mean something about you instead of the task you performed, and instead of it being an opportunity for you to learn. You're haunted by a past failure you can't let go of, and you allow that to dictate how you see yourself today and the lack of trust you have in yourself right now, even though it happened, that past failure, even though it happened a long time ago. You tell yourself, I hear this a lot, it's another sneaky one, I'm only as good as my last deal. Just think about that for a minute. Think about how that undermines you rather than builds up your confidence. I'm only as good as, creating that need, that urgency to go after from a place of fear, from a place of insufficiency, chase after the next deal so you can prove that you are as good as that, right? So you can live up to that expectation. And another really common one, communication insecurity. So when you do actually have the courage, the confidence, whatever it takes for you to speak up, to communicate, to share your opinions, you then go away, you beat yourself up over, maybe you said the wrong thing, or the way you said it wasn't good enough, you weren't articulate enough. So many ways that we self-sabotage. Category number 4 is playing small. This is all of the ways in which you hide. You want to avoid being seen, avoid being visible. Here's how you know you're doing it. You propose other people for opportunities that come by. You think perhaps momentarily about yourself, but your brain wants to go straight away to all the other people you think are more qualified than you, a perfect fit. You turn down opportunities that are offered directly to you. You put your head down, you work hard, and then you hope. So you do the hard work, but you hope that that's enough to get you seen, get noticed, get recognized, while everybody else around you might be being more visible, more vocal, and they tend to attract the opportunities or the recognition. You don't speak up in meetings. You don't network, attend where there are opportunities to network. You don't grab them. Or another sneaky one, you go to networking events, you attend these, but let's say they're virtual, you keep your camera off. Or if they're live, you only speak to people you already know where it feels safe. You've got to be onto yourself. Attending a networking event isn't enough. You can still be hiding even when it looks like you're showing up. And then how about this one? You say you don't want to be partner, or whatever the highest level is in your industry, in your career, right? I don't want to be partner. Now that sounds like a very innocent statement, but so often, as I see when I unpick these thoughts that you have about what your career ambitions are, when I unpick those in Imposter Syndrome coaching, what we can see is that is driven by insufficiency, a fear that you wouldn't be good enough to be partner, or a fear that even if you were good enough to partner, you wouldn't like it. You see other people's way of modeling partnership and you think it would have to be like that for you. So you have no ownership over your ability to actually create a a partnership style, let's call it that, of your own to decide that for you, how being a partner would work for you. And finally, you don't showcase your achievements. Maybe you think about it. Maybe you go to post something on social media or mention something in a meeting, but you talk yourself out of it, deciding, well, it's not very interesting for other people, or no one cares. That used to be a favorite thought of mine. I'm not going to share this because no one cares. So what you've heard there is a relatively long list of behaviors, of actions, which, when driven by this insufficiency, this fear of not being enough, are secret signs of imposter syndrome. And they're secret because we don't automatically associate them with imposter syndrome. They're not the classic ones we talk about normally, but they are there and they are real, and they are holding you back in your career. So tell me, what did you think? Did you recognize any of these in you? I want you to go away having listened to this live and really think about it as you go through your day-to-day working style, habits, you approach your work and interact with people. Which of these behaviors are showing up for you automatically, perhaps unconsciously? And then feedback to me, come back, post in the comments, DM me, send me a direct message. I'd love to hear how many of these really resonate with you. So tomorrow I'm going to be live again at 9 a.m. UK time as well. And I'm going to be talking about now how imposter syndrome is holding you back in your career. Because we've been through the classic signs, I've talked through the secret signs. Now we want to know, well, what does all of that mean? Why does it matter? Why you should care? So tune in tomorrow, 9 o'clock UK time. I'll try and give you a bit more notice this time. And I'll be talking about how imposter syndrome is holding you back. Make sure you join me. I'll see you then. Thanks for your time. Have a beautiful day.